right. Well, welcome back to being actually here and not just behind the computer screen for you all who are here. The last week, we looked at the importance of the various teachings that Jesus does. So not only his direct teachings, but also looking at his various parables. What was a parable? Anybody remember?
Wasn't it Jesus direct or indirect or direct teachings?
It's an indirect teaching, right? It is a story that Jesus uses to offer a teaching in a way that is perhaps a little bit easier to memorize or easier perhaps to even comprehend. But of course, this is not all that Jesus is known for. Jesus is not just known for teachings. He's also known for his works, for what he does. And in fact, looking at the great things that he does that are called miracles. It is this idea of miracles that is perhaps the hardest to understand or perhaps even believe for many in the modern world. Thomas Jefferson is famous for taking copies of the New Testament, or at least the Gospels, and cutting out many of these passages. He felt it was just too incredulous. It was just too incredulous that this actually happened. So condensing the Gospels and the Bible down to just teachings. In fact, you can buy copies of kind of modern copies of Jefferson's Bible to see what it would look like. But it takes out, removes these miracles. Yet they are not some fantastical element added on to give the story some flair. We talked about at the beginning of all of this. All of this is revealed as true. All of this being true in one way or another. Whether speaking some greater truth or being true in the sense at least that it did happen in some way. These miracles are attested to time and again. The sheer number of miracles that are given in the Gospels alone, let alone in other places. How can we define what a miracle is? Basic definition of a miracle is it is an extraordinary event or feat, F-E-A-T, or accomplishment. An extraordinary event or feat that can only be explained by the direct intervention of God. An extraordinary event or feat that can only be explained by the direct intervention of God. Why? Because miracles break the rules. They break, as it were, the rules, the laws, the order of creation. They are miraculous. They're kind of wonderful to behold because they are not ordinary. If they were ordinary, they wouldn't be so special or wonderful, would they? They are extraordinary. They are out of the ordinary. They are so different than what we are used to. So that's a basic definition of what miracles are. We have numerous examples, of course, of them in the Old Testament. What are some of the miracles of the Old Testament? What's perhaps the most famous one? Parting of the Red Sea, right? Others?
Moses raising his hand on the battlefield and the Jews being able to win.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good one. I'll phrase it like that. Moses' hands held up. As long as they were held up, the Israelites gained victory. Others? What's that?
Daniel not getting eaten.
Yes. The story of Daniel and the lions. The prophet Daniel was thrown into a den of lions, which normally is a death sentence.
Amen.
Yes. The manna that falls from heaven. As the Israelites are journeying through the desert, they can't grow anything because they don't stay in one place. So how are they to be fed? How are they to be nourished? Every morning, or every morning except the Sabbath morning, God rained down this manna for them to eat. On the day before the Sabbath, He would rain down a double portion so that they had enough. Other ones, such as the flood. It could be miraculous. It could be a natural event, granted a very large edition of a natural event. All these things, they exist because it is the active intervention of God on behalf of His people. All of these happen ultimately by God. God may have His agents, such as, for example, the hands of Moses, the lions with Daniel. But these miracles happen because God actively intervenes for and even with His people in the context of the Old Testament. Now, God does not just give them a command or tell them to do something and then just, all right, yours to show it, yours to deal with. No. He actively intervenes. There is a twofold purpose that is often seen with all of these miracles that happen. Both being true. The first is, as it were, healing. That these miracles are done to heal the people of God in some way. Maybe from physical hunger, hence the manna that falls in the desert. Maybe they heal them in the sense of restoring them to freedom, to no longer be slaves in Egypt. Hence the parting of the Red Sea and walking through the Red Sea dry-shod. So the first purpose is healing. The other is kind of revelatory. To reveal what? To reveal God's power. The numerous examples that exist throughout the Old Testament very much demonstrate that the God of the Israelites is the true God, and in fact, the only God. Time and again, that some agent of God, whether it be Moses, whether it be one of the prophets, challenges those who proclaim another god, an idol, or anything like that. And God working through, revealing himself through those individuals, shows himself triumphant over that other god, that idol. The whole episode of the Passover, for example, going to show who is truly in command, not the king of Egypt, not Pharaoh, but the God who allows Pharaoh to rule. There's a great episode in the life of the prophet Elijah, where they are trying to say, who is the real God? Is it the God of the Israelites, or is it this Baal? And Elijah is the last of the prophets of God at that point. And there are about 500 different prophets or priests of Baal. He challenges them. He says, let's go up on the hill over here tomorrow. Let's offer up a sacrificial offering and see which God receives it. My God, Elijah says, or your God, your Baal. So they go up, the Baalites build an altar, they offer up, they kill a sacrificial lamb. They spend all morning until noon in various rituals, shouting, screaming, cutting themselves even.
That's great.
Near the end of it, Elijah even mocks them. He goes, hey, why don't you call louder? He's probably asleep. Bible truth, by the way. I didn't make that up. So the hour comes, nothing's happened. Nothing miraculous has happened. Elijah does the similar thing. Builds an altar, makes a sacrificial lamb, prepares it. He tells the people to pour water over the whole thing. The wood and the lamb and everything. They do that. He says, do it again. They do it again. He says, do it again. They do it a third time. Elijah offers a short little prayer, probably not heard by any. And fire comes down from the sky and consumes the lamb and even the altar. Even though it is triply soaked, consumes it all. Thus revealing who is truly in control, who has the power. This is what leads the ancient Jews and even the current Jews to proclaim what is known as the Shema. After the first word of the verse, which comes from Exodus, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, is only. He is the only one, because he is the only one who does any of this. So to see all of these things happening in and through Jesus is another way to tie him to the God of the Israelites, to the one true God, as ultimately believed. It reveals his power and who he shares it with, thus implying something about who this Jesus is. Along with offering healing, though it hints at the deeper healing that Jesus wishes to accomplish in people. So just as there is a twofold purpose to miracles, there are two general types of, two categories, as it were, of miracles that we encounter Jesus doing? First, it's called the same thing, healing miracles. Miracles of healing. And they do exactly as it says. So, these things not only bring about healing, but they also demonstrate the authority of Jesus over creation. In particular, over the creatures that are human beings. So, healing the sick. Opening the ears of the deaf, opening the eyes of the blind, opening the mouths of the mute. The deliverance from demons, which will be a topic that we get to in the second half of this week. And lastly, and just as important, raising the dead. The other category, there are the miracles of healing, the healing miracles. The other one are called nature miracles. Because instead of dealing with human creatures who are weak, who are frail, who can break, it deals with the totality of creation, though it may involve human beings as well. So, for example, the calming of storms. Jesus walking on water and calming storms. The multiplication of food, loaves, fish, to feed thousands. The cursing of fig trees. And even the ability to change substances, which we'll see the greatest example of that in the gospel, in any of the gospels, not actually in any of these gospels, but in the Gospel of John. So in looking at all of this, taking up some examples, we see what it is Jesus is wanting to do in all of this. Sorry, I got in here late. So time to warm up. It's nice when I'm still signed in, even though it's not what I intended. So the first example that I'd like to give, the example of healing. The one that I want to give in this example is the healing of a centurion's servant. So I'll put it here. It's in Matthew 8, 5 to 13. It is in Luke. It is not in Mark 7, 1 through 10. We'll look at a second to bring it up here. If you got the reference. Check the video again. So, Matthew 8, verses 5 through 13. Scroll up a bit. He talks about, as Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, beseeching him. Notice here, first of all, who comes before him? Who is a centurion? What is a centurion? Yeah.
A Roman soldier.
A Roman soldier.
Roman commander.
Yes. Ultimately, a commander, more so than a soldier. He's a commander, but he is a soldier still. But the important part to emphasize is, first of all, this is not one of the Jews, ethnic, I'm talking ethnicity. He is a Roman. He is a soldier. He is a part of the imperial authorities. He carries behind him the authority of Caesar. Basically, whatever is his word goes. And yet this centurion, who's supposed to be over the people, in a benevolent way, but still in certainly over the people, these foreigners, these subject peoples. He comes to this man who has become famous for all of this. He comes to Jesus, beseeching him, asking him, begging him. What is he asking? He says, Lord. This is not a word that a Roman would think to use to anyone beneath him. The Jews made reference to Lord, but a Roman would not, but to one above him, superior to him. Again, already, the centurion having some greater understanding about this Jesus. Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home in terrible distress. Jesus responds to him and says, very well, I will come to your house, to his house, and I will heal him. The centurion continues. He always says, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. A great sign of humility. I, the lesser, am not worthy to have you come into my home. But only say the word, and my servant will be healed. And even compares it to himself. I am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I say to one, go, and he goes. I say to another, come, and he comes. And to my slave, do this, and he does it. He says, it's not necessary for you to go. Just say the word, and he'll be healed. Jesus marvels at this. Literally, marvels. And says aloud, not even in Israel have I found such faith. Not even among his own people has he found someone who has believed in him as much as this foreigner, this supposed agent of evil, depending on which group of the Jews you're with. This one who believes him powerful enough that all he has to do is standing where he's at, as far away as he is from the home, that Jesus just has to say the word, and the slave, the servant, will be healed. And even in the context of Matthew offers it in the sense of that many will come and dine with the true believers. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why are those three mentioned? Oh, yeah.
Because in the Old Testament, they gave total faith to God.
Yes. They are the great patriarchs of faith for the ancient Jews. I should say for the Jews, period, even the current Jews. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who eventually is renamed Israel. Because of their faith, because of their belief, everything happened in their time in the Old Testament and everything flowing from it. They believed in this God. Jesus compares this centurion with these patriarchs in Matthew's recalling, to show that faith can be found in anyone, not just in a particular race or a particular people. To the centurion, he says, "Go, let it be done as you have believed." And the servant was healed at that very moment. Luke kind of lets it go on a little bit longer, that the centurion returns home, discovers that the slave is healed, and asks, "When did it happen?" And they say, "At such and such an hour," which was the same moment. The same moment Jesus said, "Go, he'll be healed." So in this example of the servant of the centurion being healed, not only do we see Jesus' power demonstrated, we see it demonstrated to a greater extent than perhaps most of the other examples of healing. Why? Most of them happen face to face, basically. Jesus is right here. Whoever needs to be healed is right in front of him. But in this case, this person is far away, out of sight. And yet the centurion, who has more faith than almost anyone else around Jesus, asks him not to depart, not to waste his time, as it were, to come to his lowly abode. Just say the word. Again, revealing who has the ultimate power. And interesting that it is a centurion, one who is of the greatest power in the Western world at this point. One who bears the crest of Rome, the banner calling out of the people who have done this, the Senatus Populusque Romani, the Senate and the people of Rome. The imperial eagle, the image of Caesar himself. And yet he humbles himself before this one who demonstrates a far greater authority and power than even Caesar. Another example. Let's see which one.
Got it.
Another one, the example of the raising of the dead. We'll see this in Mark. Mark chapter 5, starting at verses 21.
What chapter was it in Luke for the last two?
In Luke, it was, the centurion's servant was Luke chapter 7, verses 1 through 10. So actually we'll see, close it. We'll see two healing miracles here. The first one, the one that grabs our attention, is the raising of the dead. But another one we hear and see is another type of healing. So starting here, Mark chapter 5, verses 21, and this is in Matthew chapter 9 and Luke chapter 8 as well, though the texts may be slightly different. So Mark starts off, and when Jesus crossed again to the other side of the lake, a great crowd greeted him, and he remains beside the sea. Okay, one of the rulers of the synagogue, whether Mark is meaning in some way, and all of them pretty much use this language, the ruler of the synagogue. Maybe something we might say as akin to a modern rabbi, it's unclear. The ruler who is given a name, Jairus or Jairus. Seeing Jesus, that's the him that is being referred to here. Seeing Jesus, Jairus fell at Jesus' feet and saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her that she may be made well and live." So he petitions on behalf of his daughter, who is dying for some reason. The text does not say what or why. Jesus has said, gives agreement to it. Jesus goes with him. This, by the way, this is why English is terrible. What's the he, what's the him? It's much more clear.
I have to ask, do you ever, are you supposed to capitalize? I know some people capitalize he or him when they're talking about God.
So, she asks about the capitalization, and that's actually a good point. The capitalization of pronouns. So, oftentimes in many traditional or rather pious things, when you're referring to God or to Jesus, you will go he instead of, you won't do that. Either one is fine. It is not mandated, and I'm not going to mandate you to do it. That is done more as a sign of reverence and respect for those who are believers. And also, even in a certain way, that can even be a way to emphasize which he or him we're talking about. So, important little aside, but anyway. So Jesus says he will, and there's a great crowd that follows Jesus. This is the first miracle that we'll actually see in this text. Mark writes, there's a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years. Most usually translated in some way as a hemorrhage. Hemorrhage is usually something that happens that causes one to bleed, but not necessarily to bleed to death. So hence the flow of blood. This woman has had this for 12 years, and it says, had suffered much under many physicians, had spent all that she had, was no better, but actually was worse. She was weaker. She was more infirm after going to all these physicians. She, like so many, she's a part of this crowd. She, like so many, here's these reports. She comes up behind Jesus. She sneaks kind of behind him. She does not make a petition. She does not make a cry. She doesn't say anything. All she does is reach out and touch his garment. That's all she does. She reaches out and touches his garment. For she says, verse 28 here, for she said, if I touch even his garments, I shall be made well. Again, a great sign of faith. If I just even touch his garments, I will be made well. 29, Mark writes, immediately the hemorrhage ceased. The flow of blood closes up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. She immediately recovers upon just touching his garment. But it doesn't end there. Jesus stops in his tracks. Starting verse 30 here, I'll scroll up so it's easier to see. Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone forth from him, immediately turned about in the crowd. And he says, who touched me? Who touched my garments? Now, this is a little bit of that Markan realism we're talking about. Next verse, 31. His disciples said, the crowd's pressing around you. They're all over you. Everyone's clamoring for you. Everyone's touching you. Long before COVID, of course. They're all over you, and yet you say, who touched me? What are you talking about, Jesus? They're all touching you. They're all grabbing at you. He's basically a celebrity. He is a celebrity, pretty much. In more ways than one. You're just like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? But he still continues. He looks around, looking to see who has touched my garments. And this woman, knowing what she's done, is rather afraid. She doesn't know what he's going to do. He sounds perhaps like he's perturbed, angered. She comes forth, trembling, with fear, falls down and tells him everything, hoping he will forgive her, hoping he won't ask for her to be stoned, which is a punishment easily given out in those days. He says to her, daughter. He gives her this humble, loving title, daughter. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed. Again, someone who exhibits faith is healed. This often happens in these healing miracles. Most of them are done because people who believe ask Jesus to do it. There are some that Jesus just does it on his own. There's one example that we can see in Luke after this. But the woman is healed. And he lets her go. He says, go in peace. Be healed. Your faith has saved you. So with that, she leaves consoled, strengthened, healed. So that's the first miracle we see in this account. Now we go to the second. Because remember, he's going to the ruler of the synagogue's house. He's going to the house of Jairus, trying to heal this daughter who's on the point of death. In the midst of it, and perhaps, the family might argue, because Jesus was stopped by this woman, delayed because of what happened with the Syrophoenician woman. Someone runs from the ruler's house and says, your daughter is dead. She is gone. She cannot be healed. Why do you disturb the teacher, the Rabboni, anymore? But Jesus just turns to Jairus, turns to the ruler. He says, don't be afraid. He says, just believe. Again, the emphasis of believing. Believing in who Jesus is and what he can do. He actually then approaches the house. Before that, he allows only a couple of people to go with him. The inner circle. Peter, Simon Peter, whom we heard a little bit about last week, I should say. James, and John, the brother of James. These are, as it were, the inner circle of Jesus' disciples, the ones he seems to work and to cooperate with the closest. So he tells everybody else, stay away. I'll be back. He continues to the house. He sees a tumult. He sees an uproar. All of the house, which is not just the family, but the slaves or the servants or the workers, everyone is in an uproar. Why? They are now in mourning. In ancient cultures, and even in humbler cultures, there is a period of mourning that begins immediately after death has occurred. Public mourning. We Americans oftentimes can be very stoic people. Don't like to show our emotions as much. But in other cultures, they begin loudly wailing, loudly moaning, loudly weeping. And this has already begun with this family. She's dead. She's gone. The mourning has begun, losing especially a child. If I remember right, I believe the text says she's not even 12. Yeah. Oh, it says it right there. Watch it. Okay, cheating on my notes. I see how it is. So Jesus approaches. He enters the house. He says, what are you doing? What are you doing? She's not dead. She's not dead. She's asleep. She's just asleep. Well, this puts everybody in a different type of uproar. They all laugh at Jesus. What do you mean?
I can kind of picture that. It'd be rather eerie, wouldn't it? They're all crying and screaming. Jesus walks in, he's like, what are you guys doing? She's sleeping.
Probably, yeah. Probably like the sarcastic laugh.
Probably maybe it's
What do you mean? No. I mean, no. She's dead. No. Well, you don't. Yeah.
It probably be more hysterical.
Perhaps. It could be in that way as well. Yeah.
Analysis. Yeah, I was about to say what he was going to say.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Or they're just so overwhelmed with emotion, yes, that it becomes very easy to laugh at something like, oh, no. So, yeah, they laugh. What do you mean? No. You're clearly the most delusional of all of us. She's not dead. She is dead. She's not sleeping. So Jesus kicks them all out. And it doesn't say how big this house is. We don't know if it was just one room or maybe a couple rooms. But he kicks them all out. He keeps his gang of three, Peter, James, and John, and keeps her parents. The father, the man who got Jesus, that Jairus, her mother. He goes in there. He enters the chamber where her body now lays. He picks her up by the hand. And Mark's is important because Mark's is the most real. Mark writes the exact phrase Jesus knows, Talitha cum, or Talitha cumi. Mark translates it for us, of course. It means little girl, or sometimes it's just girl. I say to you, arise. That's not her name. Her name is not Talitha. It just means little girl, rise. And immediately, without delay, the girl got up and walked. And they emphasize the age to emphasize that she is one who should be able to walk. It's not hard. And everyone around Jesus, were immediately overcome with amazement. Now, of course, this being Mark's account, we have the Mark in secret. And Jesus strictly charged them, no one should know this. He also gives a little bit of, he says, give her something to eat. Now that seems sort of practical, right? She might be very hungry. It's also to affirm that she is indeed a human being. Not some ghost or some spirit possessing her body, but indeed a real human being, fully alive once more. Only a human being can eat and will eat.
So, in Mark, I forget, it was like closer near the end of it, but like at certain points in the Gospel of Mark, he tells people to tell his work, but then at other points he tells them to keep it secret.
He tells them not to publish it until afterwards, until after everything has happened to him. He's more secretive in Mark. And we talked about that in looking at kind of the overview of these three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The Mark in secret is most likely because a part of perhaps Mark's very realistic account. Why? Because these miracles, these works are tremendous. I mean, three that we've already looked at are very tremendous themselves, and there's plenty more where that came from. And yet, people can misunderstand them in thinking they know what's going to happen or that how things should be or will be.
Hey, Father Straub.
Yes, 1 second here.
It
Yes.
literally just randomly booted me out for some reason, and it kept trying to connect. So I just came back. So I missed like a good amount of what you just said.
Well, not too much missed yet, so might want to rewatch that time in the video when it's posted.
All
Right.
right, thank you.
But with the Mark in secret, why? Because they want to see Christ Jesus in their own way. Jesus wants to do these things, but he knows they'll be misinterpreted. So he doesn't want them announced. Not because he hates them, no. Because they need to be understood in the proper context, which is why he says, and he says it in the other ones as well, but more so in Mark's gospel, that he says, don't talk about these things until the death and resurrection of the Son of Man.
Wasn't it because he didn't want them to see like the political power?
Yes, pretty much. Most of their idea of the Messiah, the Christos, is more of a political reign or a political empire. And what Jesus does transcends the political. There is some of that involved in it, but that it is not a mere political reality. It is higher, it is greater than that.
Would they get in trouble if they went and told? Because I remember one of the stories, he said, don't
No.
tell, and they went right after him.
No, I mean, the texts don't say that. I mean, if that was the case, it would be most likely that would have been revealed. It makes life harder on Jesus, though, because first of all, as you saw in this text, he now has vast crowds following him. He's flooded with people everywhere he goes as his fame rises. And what else happens with fame? As people get more popular, more people hate them. For one reason or another, right? People grow very jealous, envious of those who obtain the heights of popularity. Stalkers, right? Or other people who work with them, like, well, I should be there. I'm better than them. I know more. I can do better. That's what happens in conjunction with all of this. As Jesus' popularity rises, there's anger railed up against him, especially from the Pharisees. So let's look in turn at some of the nature miracles to see how it is. See how it is Jesus shows his dominion, his authority over creation. The first one, we'll do one still while we're in Mark. Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41.
They're so cute.
Chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. 35 to 41. This is also in Matthew and Luke, both of them in chapter 8. Or a very similar one.
First one was John.
This is Mark. Mark, well, I'm sorry.
I keep
John has his own
I keep
accounting and recollection of miracles that we will look at when we look in particular at the Gospel of John. John, as you're going to see, John is his own man. There is some correspondence, but John is far more on his own than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John's the nerd in the front of the room who does his own work, whereas Matthew, Mark, and Luke are in the back kind of copying off each other. Don't quote me on that. But don't do it either. It's fine for synoptics to do it. You can't do that. So, chapter 4, verses 35 and following. So Jesus has been talking. You know, we see here actually looking a few verses up, 33, with many such parables, Jesus spoke to them. You know, he didn't speak without a parable and all that. So, evening comes, Jesus relaxing says, let us go to the other side. In Mark, he's more often than not kind of more in nature, or more associated with the Sea of Galilee, which is not a big sea. It's not really a sea, it's just a large lake. But they get in a boat and they begin going to the other side.
Thanks.
There are other boats that are following. Like I said, Jesus is very popular. It's like cars following along following along the limo. That's why they clear the road for the president, right? They don't want anybody following him.
They're getting up to
In
bed
the midst of this journey at night, a great storm arises. The waves beat into the boat. The boat begins to fill with water. So it seems to be on the point of sinking. And what's Jesus doing? Verse 38, but, a heavy but there. But he was in the stern asleep on the cushion. And again, Mark and realism here. They, his disciples, those close to him, they woke him and they say, Teacher, Master, Rabboni, do you not care if we perish? They're desperately probably trying to put all this water back onto the boat. It keeps filling up. And he's asleep. He's crashed on the cushion, just asleep. First of all, just incredible that a boat being shaken that much and he's still asleep. They're probably already incredulous at him like that. But then further, it's like we're dying here. We're sinking. Do something. Why can't you help us? Jesus awoke, and he immediately rebukes the wind, turns it back. He says to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Almost as if nothing had happened at all. A great storm, a great wind, great waves, to calm. Jesus turns, he says to his buddies, his disciples, why are you afraid? Have you no faith?
An immediate.
A great contrast between the previous accounts that we saw where someone had great faith in asking Jesus to do something versus these guys who, even though this is earlier than all that, have still seen Jesus do immense things. He is critiquing them. Like, do you not really believe? Do you not know who I am? Despite all you've seen, all you've encountered, do you not know who I am? See? Another element of Markan realism. One could argue that if this was supposed to be completely pro-disciples, this would not be in there because it looks terrible. It makes them look like weak men, does it not? Frail, anxious. But no, it's maintained in there. To very much so what type of people these disciples are. And even in a sense, what type of person Jesus is. What happens afterward? They're filled with awe and they are amazed beyond belief at all of this. Who then is this? They begin asking, who then is this that even wind and sea obey him? Who ultimately do wind and sea obey? God. Hence, these miracles, these actions, these events all affirm or reveal the divinity of Jesus Christ. That he is in some way, somehow, God. Now, if even wind and sea obey him, who else can wind and sea obey? We can't even get the wind and the sea to obey us in the 21st century. All our fancy technology. Highlighting, emphasizing, or showing to us who and what this Jesus is. That he is God. He is in some way from God and of God. One last miracle account. This will be one of the feeding accounts. This will be Mark chapter 6, verses 32 to 44. Go back. Mark 6, 32 to 44. This is in Matthew chapter 14 and Luke chapter 9. This again happens after crossing the sea. They went away in the boat to a lonely place by themselves, but Jesus becoming more and more popular. Many saw them coming and going, knew them, ran there. They could see who it was. They could see it was Jesus in the boat. And they get to that spot so that it's not any longer any lonely. As he went ashore, and always note, he travels at night. He travels in a boat at night. It's an overnight journey that happens so that he gets somewhere in a boat in the morning. Not too far, but a little bit farther than he could walk. Basically, it's probably the only way he could get any rest anyway. So, when he went to shore, he saw a great throng. He had compassion on them. Mark writes, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. They seemed lost. They seemed desirous of direction, being shown the way. And Jesus began to teach them many things, although Mark doesn't write for us what he taught. When it grew late, so they were there all day. When it grew late, his disciples come and they say, Jesus, it's a lonely place. We're out in the middle of nowhere. The hour is late. Send them away. Tell them to go. Go into the country and go into the villages, to get something to eat. They've been here all day. Anyways, he says, as he went ashore, he goes ashore in the morning. He says, when it grew late, perhaps getting close to sunset. But they've been listening and hearing. And yet these disciples, out of concern, and rightful concern, they said, Jesus, that's enough for the day. Let them go. Let them get something to eat for themselves. Let them go walk to the Wendy's and the Burger Kings. We ain't got that out here. We're in the sticks. Jesus answers, he says, you give them something. You give them something to eat. They said, what, are we going to buy 200 denarii worth of bread? A little context. The denarius or sometimes Latinized with a U, denarius, in the ancient economy was basically worth a day's wage. So if you put in a day's worth of work, you earned 1 denarius. And that should be more than enough to at least get some food for you for the day, to pay your expenses for the day. So they go, what do you mean? You want us to use 200 days worth of wages? It's a lot of money, which shows there's a lot of people out there. It's not just a handful of people, a couple, 10, 20, or maybe even 100. There's a lot of people out here. If it takes this much bread to feed them. Jesus asks them, he says, how many do you have? How many loaves do you have? Many people often would carry their food with them, right? We do that in one way or the other sometimes. Probably did when we were in elementary school at least, right? Old lunchbox, lunch pail. Says, how many loaves can you find? Go and see, how many can you find? When they go through everyone, they say they can find 5 loaves, and they also find 2 fish. Which is incredible in my opinion, because I would think that would be very smelly at this point. It's been out all day. Maybe it's been salted, Salt the fish, and it keeps the smell down a little. So they give Jesus these 5 loaves and these 2 fish. Jesus commands them to sit down. He says to command in various companies. So he breaks them down into groups, by hundreds and even by 50s. We're talking hundreds here. So yeah, there are a lot of people. How are 5 loaves and 2 fish going to feed hundreds and 50s and companies? Taking the loaves and the 2 fish, he looks up, he blesses them, he breaks them, and he gives them to the disciples to set before the people. Along with that, the 2 fish. Mark writes, they all ate. Not only did they eat, they were satisfied. There's an important note to make. It's not just that they ate. We could eat a slice of bread, right? It doesn't necessarily satisfy us, though. Might keep the hunger down a little, right? A nice little snack until you can get to dinner. No, they not only ate, they were all satisfied. They were full from eating all of this. Jesus commands them to gather up the broken pieces and the fish, and they count up 12 baskets. Why is that number important? What should you think of at 12? Yes?
12 tribes.
12 tribes of
Israel.
12 tribes of Israel. What else were you going to say?
12 apostles.
12 is usually a sign of the people of God. 12 tribes of Israel. Mark ends the account by saying that those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. And I believe it is intentional and purposeful to translate men here. This is not necessarily a condemnation or a belittling of other groups, especially like children and women. I think this is important to say here because it goes to show how great Jesus' following is. It takes something to attract men to follow you. Men, male men, are stubborn creatures.
No, we're not.
Listen, you. D- now. Show you his stubbornness. No. Men are the most stubborn of creatures. Ladies, you know I'm right? For Jesus to have 5,000 men who are coming to him says something about Jesus. He is so magnanimous. He is so great in all that he is and all that he does. He is attracting the attention even of men. And I don't need to say that it's easier for women and children and all that. No, it is just emphasizing how great is his following. Even this many are doing this. Even men who always try to stick to themselves, never want to budge. Even they are following Jesus. So Jesus demonstrating his authority over creation in these nature miracles. His authority over humanity in his healing miracles. All of that to highlight, to emphasize, to remind us who and what he is. These are just as important as his teachings, these miracles, these wonders, because they affirm the teachings. They affirm why we should listen to this Jesus. There are plenty of people who can be teachers, right? Even the poor schmuck in front of you. But this shows he is more than just a teacher. There is something greater going on here. As is highlighted sometimes in some of the people talking about it. A new teaching with authority. What is this? It is something that can only come from God himself. So we cannot and must not reject the miracles. On the contrary, they are essential to help us know who this Jesus is. Comments, thoughts, questions on any of that?
Can you give us an example miracle?
A what?
Can you give us an example miracle, just perform one?
No, I can't. F-. Thou shalt not tempt the Lord your God. Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
What is this one called again? Is that like the multitude of the...
Multiplication of loaves is usually, or sometimes it's called the feeding. This one, the feeding of 5,000. That's usually kind of the simpler way to phrase it, the feeding of 5,000. Because there are multiple times that this happens. So that's why we don't necessarily just use the same word, multiplication of loaves. That's the kind of general thing that happens here. Touch. That's the general thing that happens here. This specific episode that we just looked at, this is the feeding of the 5,000.
Do all of the different versions of this throughout the Gospels, do they all mention 5,000 men?
They mention at least 5,000. The verbiage may be different. They may use more general term. They may use people. Like Mark here is more specific in using men. Sometimes it may just be 5,000 or just 5,000 people. Mark here, that's why it's so highlighted. It's men, not necessarily people. There is a distinction. There's very much a distinction in Greeks. All right? So we will take a break there.